My name is Rachel, and the day we buried our mother felt like the world was folding in on itself. The sky was a dull, swollen gray, the kind that seems to absorb every bit of color from the earth, leaving nothing but muted tones and a quiet, bone-deep ache. The cemetery was damp with yesterday's rain, and the air carried that heavy, metallic scent of wet grass and grief. I stood by the casket with my hands clasped, knuckles white, trying to keep myself steady. Not because of sorrow I'd already grieved, slowly, silently, over months spent by her side, but because I knew this day wasn't just about saying goodbye. It was about what came next, about what my sister would do once the performance was over. Vanessa was already playing her part. Her eyes were red, but her tears were dry. She wore black like it was just another costume, a perfectly tailored designer coat that matched her shoes and manicure. She had arrived late, of course, just before the service started, sweeping in like a storm wrapped in perfume. She hugged people she hadn't spoken to in years, offered sobs that were just a little too loud, a little too perfectly timed. Everyone saw what she wanted them to see. She was always good at that, at being seen. After the final words were spoken, and the casket was lowered, I turned to leave, but she was already by my side. I could smell her breath, sweetened with mint and maybe a little wine. She leaned in close, just enough for no one else to hear, and I felt her lips curl near my ear. "How does it feel?" she whispered, being the most useless one here. I didn't flinch, not because it didn't hurt, but because I had expected it. This was Vanessa's way. She couldn't bear the thought of someone else having the last word, especially not me. I had spent my life beneath her shadow, the forgotten sibling, the quieter one. She used to tell people I was soft, like it was an insult, that I was boring, invisible, and for most of my life, I believed her. I turned to face her, meeting her eyes. My voice was calm, maybe even soft, but it carried all the weight she wasn't ready for. "How does it feel?" I said, knowing. She left everything to the useless one. Her expression didn't change right away. There was a flicker, just the smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth, and then nothing. She turned her head slightly, probably aware of who might be watching. Vanessa didn't like cracks in the surface, but the damage was done. The truth, spoken aloud, hung between us like a bell that had just been struck, still ringing in both our chests. You see, my mother had known. She saw everything, even when she said nothing. She knew who stayed and who ran, who came only when it was convenient, and who was there when it counted. And now, her silence had spoken. This was the moment. Everything changed. A week before the funeral, I sat in the lawyer's office, knees tucked together, palms damp on my lap. The room was far too pristine: mahogany bookshelves lined with unread hardcovers, a ticking brass clock that seemed too loud in the silence, and the faintest scent of old paper and coffee. The lawyer, Mr. Channing, had kind eyes, the kind that tried to soften what was about to come, but there's only so much softness to be found in a room like that. My sister sat across from me, legs crossed, her phone in hand, scrolling like she had better places to be. Maybe she did. He cleared his throat gently and opened a thin manila folder, thick with words our mother would never say out loud while she was alive. She hated confrontation, but here she was, speaking anyway. "I'll read this exactly as written," Mr. Channing said. He adjusted his glasses, looked down, and began. There were the usual formalities, the legal language that sounded sterile and final. Then came the words that would finally, irrevocably break whatever we had left between us. "To my daughter Vanessa," he read, "I leave my love, and the wish that she finds peace. I hope, in time, she understands that appearances are not the same as presence, and that showing up only when convenient is not the same as being there. I ask for no apologies, only honesty." Vanessa's fingers stopped scrolling, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. Mr. Channing continued, "To my daughter Rachel, I leave the house, the savings, the jewelry, and all remaining possessions. But more than that, I leave my gratitude for every quiet moment you sat with me, For every night you stayed up when I was too sick to sleep. For being my daughter when I needed one most. The room fell quiet. My chest ached, not with triumph, never that, but with a grief I hadn't expected. Not grief for my mother, I had already mourned her day by day, as her body and voice and memory slipped through my fingers like sand. This grief was for the final unraveling of the thread between me and Vanessa. She stood up slowly, placed her phone on the table, and stared at Mr. Channing like she didn't understand the language he'd spoken. "There must be a mistake," she said, voice flat. "There's no mistake," he replied gently. "She signed this herself. It was notarized in my presence. I didn't speak. I didn't look at Vanessa. I couldn't. I felt like a child. Again, suddenly too small for the chair I was in. I had never been chosen over her, not once. Not for birthdays or praise or forgiveness. And now, when it no longer mattered the way we wished it did, I had been chosen completely, entirely, and I hated that it still hurt so much." Vanessa left in silence, her heels sharp against the tile, like nails being driven into something neither of us could fix anymore. People like to pretend that illness brings families together, that when someone you love begins to fade, all the old bitterness softens, that anger dissolves in hospital hallways and grief pulls people closer. But that wasn't our story. When our mother got sick, Vanessa vanished. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way. It was more like erosion, a slow and quiet retreat. She stopped answering calls as quickly. Her visits grew shorter. Excuses became routine. Work, the kids, a trip, some crisis only she could manage. She always framed it as sacrifice. "I wish I could be there," she'd say over the phone, her voice painted in apology, "but I just can't leave everything behind right now." She always made it sound like she had more to lose, but I stayed. Not because I was better, not because I wanted some prize. I stayed because our mother needed someone to feed her when her hands shook too much, someone to rub her back through the nausea and change the sheets at 2 in the morning, someone to sit beside her when her mind wandered to places I couldn't follow. There was nothing noble in it. There were days I hated the helplessness of it all, the way her body betrayed her, the way time stretched and curled and folded in on itself. There were moments I screamed in the bathroom just to hear something loud, but I stayed. She never said much about Vanessa. At first, she'd ask where she was, wonder if she was coming for the weekend. I would lie gently, saying she was probably just caught up with things. Later, she stopped asking. I think that silence cut deeper than anything. My mother didn't beg for love. She simply learned to live without it. Sometimes I'd hear her crying late at night, not from pain though that came, too, but from loneliness. I'd crawl into bed beside her, and she'd hold my hand like she used to when I was small. Her hand was so light by then, like her bones were trying to leave her skin behind. And she would whisper, "Thank you, Rachie," the way she used to when I brought her dandelions as a kid, thinking they were real flowers. When she got too weak to walk, I moved into her house full time. I stopped seeing friends. I lost track of my job. I didn't tell anyone how hard it was, not even Vanessa, because she never asked. And after a while, I stopped expecting her to. She came once during that last month, wore white, like she wanted to be noticed. She brought flowers, orchids, in a sleek glass vase and posted a photo on Instagram before she left. She stayed less than an hour. Our mother was too weak to speak that day, but she watched her go. Her eyes followed her out the door, and then she turned to me, and for the first time in months, she looked angry. Not at me, at the woman who had once been her daughter and now only played the part. That night, she asked me to bring her the lawyer's number. Vanessa didn't explode right away. That wasn't her style. She knew how to wear pain like perfume, just enough to draw attention without making anyone uncomfortable. She kept her voice steady, smiled through her teeth, and told everyone she was just surprised about the will. She said our mother must have been confused near the end, not thinking clearly, maybe even influenced. She never said my name, but she didn't need to. The implication hung in every word she spoke, light as smoke and just as toxic. At first, people believed her, or at least, they hesitated. That was enough. My cousin Jenna messaged me, carefully neutral, asking if everything was okay. An old family friend pulled me aside after the funeral reception, saying, "I just hope your mother was in the right state of mind when she made that decision." Even my godmother, who had watched me bathe our mother's feet when the pain made walking impossible, asked if I'd spoken to someone about getting the will reviewed just to be sure there's no legal trouble. No one said it outright, but the whisper was always the same. Maybe Rachel took advantage. Maybe Vanessa is the real victim here. I didn't try to defend myself. I couldn't. I didn't have the energy to prove I was decent. My grief had settled into my bones like frost, and trying to convince anyone of anything felt like screaming underwater. I was still waking up every morning in the room where my mother died, still cooking for one out of habit, still folding the sweaters she used to live in. I was still answering her phone, forgetting for a second that there was no one left on the other end. Vanessa, meanwhile, made rounds. She hosted a small memorial dinner in Mom's honor, invited relatives I hadn't seen in years, wore a delicate gold necklace that had once belonged to our mother, something she must have taken from the house before the will was read. She posted a picture of the gathering online with a caption that said, "Still can't believe she's gone," trying to hold the pieces together. The comments were filled with hearts and crying emojis. "You're so strong, Ness. She'd be proud of you." I watched it all quietly, unsure what hurt more, her lies or how easily people believed them, but not everyone did. One afternoon, Mrs. Patel from next door brought over soup and a folded piece of paper. "I wasn't sure," she said, pressing it into my hand, "but I thought you should see this." It was a note in my mother's handwriting, brief, shaky, but unmistakably hers. Dated 2 weeks before she passed. "If Rachel is reading this, it means Vanessa has started to turn people against you. Don't let her." I saw everything. "I'm sorry I didn't say more while I was still here." I sat with that note in my lap for an hour, unmoving. It didn't fix anything, but it reminded me that someone had seen me, that my mother, even at her weakest, had chosen to believe in the quiet kind of love. Vanessa could keep spinning her version of the story, but I had the truth, and the truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits there, unshaken, waiting. It was a quiet Tuesday when I found the letter. The house was still, too still, like it had been holding its breath since the day she died. I'd started cleaning out drawers in small bursts, not because I was ready, but because the silence was beginning to press too hard against the walls. Grief is strange like that. It makes you want to both cling to everything and throw it all away. The letter was tucked inside her jewelry box, underneath a velvet pouch that once held her wedding ring. I recognized the handwriting right away, familiar. Loops and slants, though weaker now, uneven in places. My name was written on the envelope, but inside, there was another name too, both of ours, Rachel and Vanessa. My chest tightened. I sat on the floor beside her bed, the letter shaking a little in my hands as I unfolded it. I don't know what I expected, maybe more apologies, maybe a final goodbye, but it wasn't that. It was something heavier, more deliberate. "If you're reading this, then it means I'm gone, and the storm between you two has already begun. I always hoped there would be peace, but I see now that I should have been more honest when I was alive. That was my mistake. My silence didn't protect you. It only let the wound grow deeper." I stopped reading and looked around the room, as if she'd still be there, sitting in her chair with a blanket over her legs, asking if I wanted tea. The emptiness felt louder now. "Vanessa, if you're angry, I understand. I loved you deeply. Always have. But love doesn't blind me anymore. I saw how you disappeared. I saw the way you smiled for others and avoided my calls. I heard what you said when you thought I was sleeping. And I saw Rachel, how she fed me, cleaned me, read to me when my eyes stopped working. She didn't ask for thanks. She didn't need an audience. She just showed up, over and over. That's not something I can ignore. I won't. I gave Rachel everything not to hurt you, but to be fair. To leave behind a truth that I didn't have the strength to speak aloud when I should've. You'll tell yourself she manipulated me, that she made me do it. But deep down, you know better. You always knew better. I read the last paragraph again and again. It didn't offer comfort, it wasn't warm or soft. It was her voice, plain and clear, stripped of illusions. For the first time, I saw how tired she had been of pretending, of keeping the peace. She had chosen honesty in death, even if it came too late. I placed the letter back in the envelope and locked it away in a small box beneath my bed, not as a weapon, but as armor, because I knew it was only a matter of time before Vanessa would come back, claws out, demanding what she thought she deserved. But now I had more than memories. I had her words, and they were finally, truly mine. It didn't take long for Vanessa to unravel, though she did her best to keep the seams hidden. She'd spent most of her life curating herself, carefully staged. Smiles, crisis turned into opportunity, grief turned into content. But the truth has a way of seeping in, like water under a door. You can pretend it's not there until everything starts to rot from the inside. The cracks showed slowly at first. A few passive-aggressive posts online, quotes about betrayal, sisters, trust. She deleted them quickly, but not before people saw. Then came the whispers, Vanessa telling distant relatives that the will had been tampered with, that I had manipulated our mother in her fragile state. She told someone that Mom had dementia. She told another that I had always been jealous, always wanted to take her place. I stayed silent, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to feed it. I told myself it would die down, that people would see through her, that truth would hold its own weight. But Vanessa was relentless, and she had a way of saying things with just enough confidence to make people pause. Doubt doesn't need evidence, it just needs repetition. Then the letter started, a formal one from her lawyer, claiming undue influence, demanding the will be re-examined. She wanted an investigation. She wanted assets frozen. She wanted answers. There was something terrifying about seeing her name in that context in block letters, wrapped in the cold language of litigation. It was like she'd taken off the last of her masks and decided to go to war. I cried the night I got that letter, not because of the lawsuit itself, but because of what it meant, that my sister would rather destroy what little remained between us than face the truth of who she had become. It wasn't just about money. It never really had been. It was about pride, about control, about needing to win, even if the cost was everything. Mrs. Patel found me crying on the porch that evening. She brought over a warm slice of banana bread and sat beside me like I was still a child. She didn't say much, just reached into her pocket and handed me a crumpled photograph she had found in her attic, a photo of me and Vanessa, maybe ages 5 and 8, covered in sidewalk chalk, holding hands, our faces lit up with laughter. She loved you both, Mrs. Patel said, her voice gentle. But only one of you stayed when it mattered. I held the photo in my lap for a long time. I didn't know what to do with it. It felt like proof of a life that had slipped through our fingers. Vanessa was spiraling, but in her descent, she was pulling everything down with her, and I was trying so hard to hold the ground beneath my feet, to stay steady, to not let her drown me in her fury. But a storm was coming, and part of me knew I'd have to walk straight through it. It's strange, the things your mind pulls into focus when everything around you is falling apart. As Vanessa's legal threats loomed and the silence between us turned poisonous, I found myself drifting backward, back to the long corridor of our childhood. Not because I wanted to escape, but because I needed to understand how we got here. How two sisters, born of the same mother, raised under the same roof, ended up on opposite sides of a war neither of us knew how to end. Growing up, Vanessa was the shining one. She had a way of drawing people in without trying, teachers, neighbors, even strangers at the grocery store. She was bold, beautiful, magnetic. When she walked into a room, it was as if the world shifted to make space for her. I was quieter, slower. I liked books more than parties, silence more than applause. And for as long as I can remember, I lived in the echo of her charm. It wasn't always cruel. In the beginning, she protected me. She held my hand on the first day of school and taught me how to braid my hair. She'd sneak me the last cookie when mom wasn't looking. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Maybe it was when our father left. Vanessa was 13, and I was 10, and I remember her face going hard like stone when the door closed behind him. She started dressing sharper, walking taller, talking louder. She hated being vulnerable. She swore she'd never be abandoned. Again, I think she saw love as a currency after that. Something to earn, to display, to collect like trophies. And maybe, in her mind, I was always spending what I hadn't earned. Mom tried to bridge the space between us, but she was tired. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Most nights, it was just me and Vanessa eating leftovers in silence. She'd roll her eyes at me when I asked too many questions, call me clingy when I wanted to sit beside her. When mom came home, Vanessa would light up again, tell stories about her day, show off her grades. And mom, so desperate to keep the peace, never noticed how my stories stayed quiet in my throat. It's not that she didn't love me. She did, but she was stretched too thin. And Vanessa needed so much. Years later, when our mother got sick, I think some part of me believed it would bring us back together, that we'd be 2 daughters standing on the same side of heartbreak. But Vanessa stayed on the surface even then. She visited like a stranger, smiled like she was posing for something. And I stayed in the mess of it. The smell of medicine, the sponge baths, the quiet whimpers at night. That's where love lived, in the cracks and the stains, not in the pretty stories we told other people. Looking back, I wonder if mom saw all of it, if she watched us drift and hoped we'd find our way back on our own. But by the end, she knew. That's why she left me everything, not for revenge, not to punish Vanessa, but because she finally saw me fully, clearly. The truth is, I didn't want everything. I just wanted to belong somewhere in the story. And now I did, even if it broke us both. I never imagined I'd end up sitting across from my own sister in a courtroom, her eyes cold and unreadable, her mouth pressed into that flat, defiant line I'd known since childhood. It didn't feel real, not the sterile beige walls, not the lawyers' rehearsed voices, not the rustle of legal documents thick with clauses and accusations. It felt like a bad dream I kept waking into. The petition Vanessa filed was clear. She wanted to contest the will, claiming undue influence, diminished capacity, and coercion. She alleged that I had manipulated our mother when she was most vulnerable, that I had isolated her, convinced her to cut Vanessa out, taken advantage of her illness. Each word felt like a slap, not just because of what they accused me of, but because I knew they came from her. She had to believe them at least a little to say them aloud. My lawyer, a quiet man named Peter with gentle hands and tired eyes, told me to stay calm, to speak plainly, to trust the process. But how do you explain love in a courtroom? How do you prove the way a person held your hand in the dark, or the way they looked at you when the pain made them forget their own name but not yours? Vanessa's lawyer was sharp, fast-talking, polished like glass. He spoke of manipulation, of questionable timing, of sudden changes to the estate. Vanessa sat beside him like a statue, nodding occasionally, her face unreadable. I watched her, as he talked about our mother like she was a number, an asset, a thing to be divided. And something inside me broke, not for myself, but for her, for what she had become. Then it was my turn. I didn't bring a speech. I didn't rehearse. I sat on the witness stand and told them what happened. I told them about the nights I helped my mother to the bathroom, about the days she couldn't speak, and how I still read her stories just so the room wouldn't be so quiet. I told them how she once asked me if it was okay to be scared, and how I held her and said yes, even though I was terrified too. I said I didn't want her money, didn't ask for the house. I just stayed because someone needed to, and I loved her. That was it. No agenda, no angle, Peter called the hospice nurse next. She spoke gently about my mother's last months, about how she always asked for me, how she lit up when I walked in the room. She trusted Rachel, she said simply. It was obvious. She relied on her. The judge didn't make his decision that day. He said he needed time, but I didn't. I already knew the truth, and deep down, so did Vanessa. I saw it in the way she looked away when I stepped down from the stand, the way her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her necklace. A single crack in her armor. This courtroom wasn't just about property or money. It was where the truth had finally been named aloud, in front of strangers and law books and a sister who had tried to erase me, and no matter the outcome, I had spoken. I had stood, and I wasn't invisible anymore. The ruling came on a Wednesday. The sky was overcast, the kind of dull gray that stretches across the whole horizon like someone pulled a blanket over the sun. I sat in the courtroom again, palms slick against my skirt, heart hammering not from fear of losing, but from the weight of it all finally pressing down. The judge's voice was steady, unreadable as he read from his papers, his words careful and slow. He acknowledged the evidence, the testimony, the timeline. He said there was no sign of coercion, no indication that our mother lacked mental clarity when she made the changes to her will. He called the nurse's testimony compelling, and he referred to the letter my mother had written, the one she never intended to be public, as a clear expression of intent. Then, finally, the decision. The will would stand. There was no applause, no gasp from the room, no dramatic scene, just silence, like the air had been emptied out of everything. I didn't look at Vanessa right away. I stared at the floor instead, blinking against the sting in my eyes, not from relief, though I felt it, but from exhaustion, from surviving something I hadn't fully understood the depth of until that moment. When I finally looked up, she was already standing. She didn't speak, didn't make a scene, just grabbed her bag with sharp, practiced movements and walked out. No parting shot, no final insult, just her heels clicking down the hallway and disappearing around the corner, like she couldn't bear to exist in the same room with me 1 second longer. I sat there alone after everyone else left. Peter touched my shoulder once and said something kind, something soft, but I didn't really hear him. I was trying to breathe, trying to feel something other than the ache of winning a battle that cost so much. Later, when I got home, I found myself standing in the center of the living room, turning slowly like I'd never seen it before. This house, my mother's house, was mine now, legally, officially, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like inheriting a battlefield. There were still stacks of unopened mail with her name on them, slippers beside the bed, her scent on the pillows, fading more each day. I could have sold the place, started over somewhere new, but the thought of leaving her behind, leaving behind the months of whispered goodbyes and quiet caretaking, felt like another kind of loss. So I stayed. The calls from extended family came in waves. Some offered awkward congratulations, others asked questions they didn't have the right to ask. A few apologized for believing Vanessa, for doubting me, for not showing up when I needed someone to. Vanessa didn't reach out. I didn't expect her to. She lost in a way she couldn't explain to herself, let alone to the curated world she'd built. It wasn't about money, not really. It was about the story she'd spent years telling, that she was the good one, the favorite, the daughter who had it all. And now that story had fallen apart. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad, for both of us. Because somewhere, deep in the ruins of all this, there had once been 2 girls drawing chalk hearts on the driveway, but we weren't those girls anymore, and I wasn't standing in her shadow anymore. It's been a year. The house doesn't feel like hers anymore, not completely, but it doesn't feel like mine either. It feels like both of us. Her quilt still lives on the couch, and I kept the old tea tins, even though I don't drink tea. Some mornings I still wake up expecting her voice in the hallway, that low hum she used to sing when she thought no one was listening. But the quiet doesn't hurt like it used to. After the dust settled, I made a decision. I turned the guest rooms into something new, a space for caretakers, for daughters and sons like me who don't have help, who are doing the best they can. I call it respite, but it's more than that. It's love without applause. It's a place to rest, to cry, to breathe. People come and go, some broken, some angry, all tired. I sit with them. I make soup. I offer a listening ear without judgment. And in doing so, I carry forward the love that nearly broke me. Vanessa hasn't come back. I don't know if she ever will. I've stopped hoping, but I haven't stopped wishing. Some endings are quiet. No grand closure, no tearful reunion. Just a deep breath, a softer tomorrow. This was never about the will. It was about being seen, about the quiet work of love, about what we leave behind, not in our bank accounts, but in someone's memory, someone's arms. I was never useless. I was enough. If this story moved you, you're not alone. The will is about family, betrayal, and finding strength in the quietest places. Subscribe for more stories that go beyond the surface, real, raw, and resonant. Leave a comment if you've ever been underestimated, and share this with someone who needs to know that staying doesn't make you weak. It makes you powerful. Don't forget to like the video, it helps more hearts find this. See you in the next chapter.